Hello everyone, in this short video I'm going to talk about three different things. So what is research? Why research is so important? And how can we conduct research? Now, as I mentioned, I view research as a little bit different from classic textbooks. So it all starts with asking different questions, and then we search, right, to find the answers. If we can't find it at the first time, then we research. If that's not the second time, then we research until we find the best answers. But to do this research, the process actually needs good methods, right? So we can find the best answer more effectively. Now, the textbook usually define research in various ways. So you'll see you have primary research versus secondary research, and you have various shapes and size, large scale, small number, etc. And the research is never perfect, of course, all right? No matter how the authors claim that they conducted how scientific rigorous research, then there's always limitations and some space for improvements. And of course, it's really uncertain and contingent. Really, scholars would claim that their studies are definitive, right? But why we do research? We do research because we want to generalize our findings to be applied to other scenarios, right? We want to generalize our findings to the whole population if we are using a small sample. That's the purpose of generalization. And of course, it involves bits and pieces of a larger puzzle, right? So many scholars are working, try to tackle the most difficult issue in the whole world is to alleviate poverty. But how can we do that? Now, one individual research may only know one small piece. For instance, know a lot about how education can help people, to accumulate human resource that will help him or her to find a job in the job market, so that it can escape the poverty trap, something like that, right? So this is very narrowed. So then you can divide it into like a primary education or higher education. What's the effects on people's human capital accumulation? But all of this is just one piece of a very large puzzle, right? And it involves competition and criticism, of course, right? So we have a peer review process, try to secure the rigorous of research. And the research can be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed together. And it can be basic research or applied research. Basic research focuses on theory development, while the applied research focuses on apply theory to practice. Right? And generally speaking, the scientific methods should be like, when we're talking about research, right? So the epistemology means the methods of knowing. So the characters, when we talk about scientific research, we have certain characters, right? It should be like systematic, which are related to your measurement. And it should be explained in a logical way. That's why you need a theory or a model, right, to capture the theory, to represent the theory. And of course, you need to test the theory or hypothesis against the empirical reality to see whether or not it's true, right? And openness, you need to make the study transparent, so other people, if they want to replicate your study, they should be able to do so. And of course, as we said, other research researchers, they are more skeptical about your finding, so they can do a peer review through replication or things like that, right? So generally speaking, there are two ways we can do the inquiry. One is deductive, and the other is inductive, right? So for the deductive, we usually means you hypothesis an explanation, then test it with empirical evidence. While inductive begins with observation, then finally leads to an explanation, right? So, for example, if you're walking like 10 blocks and you observed, all the 10 blocks are raining, right? Then you lead to an explanation, say, oh, this is, the weather is raining, right? So this is based on your observation. Well, the deductive way, on the other hand, the previous one is inductive, obviously. The deductive way is, okay, you predict, you look at the sky, predict it's gonna rain, so you walk out, and then you walk to the first block, it's raining. The second one is raining, and you walk until the 10th block, it's all raining. Then you say, oh, it's raining, right? So this is like, you hypothesized it, right? And then you test it with walking 10 blocks. So this is the deductive way. Now, as we mentioned, there's two kinds of questions. So if you are dealing with a descriptive question, then very likely you are conducting descriptive research, right? Describe the way things are. And if you are dealing with causal questions, then you are conducting causal research, because you try to explain how things happened and how they can be changed, and ask, what if something happens, will this lead to something, other things happen, right? So the cause and the effects, right? So if you are doing that kind of research, we will call this causal research. So our best hope is, of course, may the best methods win. All right. So good research, just like a good car or good pair of shoes, right? They must be very well designed and well made. Right. Now let's explain a bit why research methods matters in public administration and nonprofit management. In public sector, nonprofits included, right? One critical challenge is to measure the performance of public agencies and nonprofit organizations. Now, of course, this is complicated, because scholars have no consensus on what constitutes the performance of a public agency or nonprofit organization. That's why we need the research methods, right? First, we need to conceptualize it, then we operationalize it, then finally we measure it, right? So the research methods really matters, because if you want to know the performance of a public organization, now of course we want to know that, right? Otherwise, how can we improve them? Now, down to the program level, we need to know whether or not a certain policy or a program is working. Right, No Child Left Behind, for instance, or legalizing marijuana, or sending talents to the rural areas. Will this actually help kids in those underdeveloped countries? All these kind of programs, policies, we needed to evaluate them. And to do evaluation, you also need research methods to help you. Okay, and nowadays we hear more and more about evidence-based policies and programs. What do we mean by evidence-based? Right, you need research methods to provide or present this evidence. Right, so that's why in our area, in public administration, nonprofit management, research methods really matter. Now, evidence as applied to policy and management, as we already talked about, But the research methods here refers to the techniques and the procedures that produce research evidence, right? So you are going to use sampling strategies, measurement instruments, planned comparisons, and the statistical techniques. All these, you are going to use this to do policy evaluation or performance measurement, then come up with evidence-based suggestions to decision makers, right? So now, personally, why methods matter to you? Now, of course, first, you are going to be more intelligent if you know certain methods, right? Because then you view evidence more critically. And you also will know how these evidence could mislead you, right? And you will be able to master the skills and to produce your own research evidence, right? Now, I'm a fan of the Big Bang Theory. It's a TV series, and so if you master certain research methods, you view the whole world differently than normal people. All right, in a sense, being a nerd, but being a nerd can also be sexy. All right, so this is how Shelton view a sandwich. It says you cannot make a half sandwich if it's not half of a whole sandwich. It's just a small sandwich, right? So this is the difference now, and it can be nerd, but it can also be beautiful and sexy. All right, so why research? Because research makes us see the world differently from a different angle, and sometimes you will explore the beauty of the world. So we talked a lot about the research, evidence, all these things. When can we find research? All right, so let me show you some examples of research. Then this is the endless list, right? So you'll find research about good universities, teachers, students. You'll find research about gun control, legalizing marijuana. How about Obamacare, for instance? No Child Left Behind, the trade war with China, and the Mexican War, of course, with Trump leaving the White House. You have new evidence coming in, right? So you needed to conduct new research. So anyway, this is an endless list, right? Now, as we said, to collect evidence, to collect data, produce research evidence, you need qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods, right? So for now, our qualitative part, we are going to focus on case studies and interviews. And one technique we are going to learn is content analysis. While for quantitative part, we are going to look at survey data analysis and the experiments, right? So we already mentioned this, right? For survey data analysis and the experiments, especially, we are going to talk about the sampling strategies, the measurement instruments, especially how you're going to measure your main variables, all right? And the planned comparisons, especially important for experiments. And of course, we need certain statistical techniques. Now, before we go, one of the critical things is the ethics of research. You need to make sure that you follow all the ethical codes, right? As long as your study involves human and animal, then the certain ethical codes need to be obeyed, all right? You can't violate them. You do no harm to people, right? And actually, when we conduct research, we should think about who's going to benefit from our findings, if any, right? And for all the higher education institute, there's an institute, or there's an agency, or there's a committee called Institutional Review Board, IRB. Right? So let's say you are going to conduct an interview, or doing a survey data analysis by surveying people, or you are going to conduct experiments with participants. All of these three methods involves human subjects, right? That means you need to go through the IRB first, all right? Before you get the permission from IRB, say they give you a green light. Before that, you cannot do anything, all right? Why the ethics of the research is so important? We are going to spend another time to focus on this and discuss it. All right. Thank you very much. That will be all for this video.